Humayun, the second Mughal emperor who during the course of his life inherited a large empire which he would go on to lose. Humayun may have been many things, including a drug addict who didn't really have the temperament to be a ruler in the first place, but he wasn't a quitter. The man didn't know how to give up, and destiny duly rewarded his perseverance with all the glory he had lost and more. Without further ado, let's get started. Humayun was born in 1508 in Kabul, Afghanistan to Babur, a man who at that moment was going through his own trials and tribulations because he had lost his beloved kingdom at Samarkand 3 times. I know what you're thinking, these guys sound like real losers, but it's not how you start the race, rather it's how you finish the race that matters. So when Babur made his move on India, his eldest son joined him, and even participated at the pivotal Battle of Panipat, which you can find out more about in the video we did about it. The fresh-faced prince would serve his imperial apprenticeship as governor of Badakhshan in Afghanistan to prepare him for the eventual prospect of succeeding his father. This followed soon after in 1530 when Babur died. It's important to remember that the Mughal position in India was far from secure by this point. The Battle of Panipat allowed them to supplant the Afghan Lodis, but they had various other opponents waiting in the wings for a moment of Mughal weakness. Unfortunately, Mughal rule, which was built upon their Timurid and Mongol roots, did not exercise primogeniture, meaning the eldest son didn't have to succeed his father. This essentially meant that all the princes got given a share of the empire, but this would often result in them fighting to see who the last man standing would be. It would probably have made Darwin proud to see such an obvious display of evolutionary behavior playing out in a scenario which determined the survival of the fittest. In any case, Humayun took control of the Mughal territories in India. He had 3 brothers who he had to contend with. I want you to remember their names, specifically the last one: Askari, Hindu, and Kamran. Before we explore the tumultuous relationship between all these brothers, I should mention that amongst Babur's last words to Humayun were, "Do nothing against your brothers, even though they may deserve it." But the actions of his brothers almost seemed like they were on a mission to get him to break his oath to his father, because as we're gonna find out, they were douchebags. Really, I mean that. Especially Kamran, who was in charge of the vital Mughal cities Kabul and Lahore to the north of Delhi. Whilst his brothers were in revolt against him, Humayun had bigger worries from outside the family as well. In western India, a man by the name of Bahadur Shah ruled over the Gujarat Sultanate and sought to take advantage of the internal conflict within the Mughal family. In 1535, Humayun received word that Bahadur Shah had ganged up with the Portuguese and were planning on attacking his Mughal territories. So he acted decisively and headed west. Within a short period of time, he had captured key forts and his foe retreated. Here, Humayun did something that can shed a lot of light onto his character. Instead of pressing his advantage and pursuing his opponent, he decided to end the campaign. Bahadur Shah would eventually get himself killed in strange circumstances by his former friends, the Portuguese. Now, as Humayun is dealing with this problem, another even more dangerous opponent is lurking on the other side of India, trying to capitalize. In eastern India, the Afghan Sher Shah Suri, an epic man in his own right, had established himself in the provinces of Bengal and Bihar and was now ready to attack the Mughal capital at Agra. So Humayun hurried back from his Gujarat campaign to protect his capital, arriving in time to prevent a siege. He could not, however, prevent Sher Shah from sacking Gaur, the main city in Bengal. This was a problem because the city had large stores of grain and other resources which would have only left Sher Shah even more emboldened about the prospect of a showdown. With the cunning Afghan out of the picture for the time being, Humayun now had to deal with an obvious affront to his authority from his 19-year-old brother Hindal, who declared himself the emperor in Agra. He had sent someone to reason with his younger brother, but Hindal had the emissary executed. Things got even more tricky when Kamran the troublemaker came down from his territories in the Punjab, apparently with the aim of acting like a peacemaker, but likely sought to place himself in the center of the empire in the event of an opportunity presenting itself whereby he could take advantage of Humayun's crumbling authority and take the crown for himself. At any rate, Humayun stayed in the east, seeking a confrontation with Sher Shah. The two sides finally met at the Battle of Kosa in 1539, whereby the wily Afghan outwitted the Mughals. The battle soon became entrenched when they dug themselves into trenches, so Humayun, wanting to break through, decided to use diplomacy. He allowed Sher Shah to rule Bihar and Bengal, but only as provinces granted to him by the Mughal Emperor. Therefore, the Afghan couldn't claim outright sovereignty and thus undermine the power and the prestige of the Mughals, because then every province would want to break away from the Mughals. With this, the conditions were set. Humayun would charge Sher Shah's troops, who would retreat in fake fear. This was all a face-saving exercise for the Mughals. All this happened according to plan, but when the Mughal forces came back to their camps, all excited about their supposed victory, they naturally let down their guard, thinking the battle was over. Here we get to witness the genius of a truly unheralded figure in history. Sher Shah decided to use this as an opportunity to go back on his word and attack the Mughals that very night. We don't know if Sher Shah had planned this from the get-go or he just thought of it on the spot, but what we do know is that on that night there was a massacre of Mughal troops, many of whom were asleep. Humayun survived by the skin of his teeth when he jumped into the Ganges and swam away. On his return to his capital at Agra, Humayun would find all three of his brothers there. Incredibly, he forgave his brothers for past misdoings, including Hindao straight up betraying him. With Sher Shah hot on his trail, Humayun had to make a decision about the best course of action to take. Should he face the Afghan head-on or fall back and fight another day? These were the questions that the Mughal brothers could not agree on. Kamran decided to return to Lahore, not interested in cooperating with his older brother. Humayun, along with his two other brothers, marched towards Sher Shah and met him at the Battle of Kanauj, where the Mughals were decisively defeated. And so begins the next and perhaps strangest chapter of Humayun's life, where he was chased out of India and had to go on the run for more than a decade, reaching new low points of desperation. You would think in those moments you can depend upon your family to push past the difficult times, but no. Kamran offered to hand Humayun over to Sher Shah if the Afghan would give him control of the Punjab. Nothing came of it, but even then Humayun refused to kill his little brother. Not welcome in Mughal Afghanistan because of Kamran, Humayun was to travel to Sindh, a region he reached after crossing a desert. The emperor is later recorded as saying that the lowest point of his life was when his 8-month pregnant wife's horse died and he was forced to lend her his own. The child, of course, would grow up to be the greatest Mughal emperor. When he crossed the Indus River into Afghanistan, the starting point of his father's conquests, he was soundly defeated by his brothers and he sought refuge in Persia. Whilst fleeing, he even had to leave his 1-year-old toddler Akbar behind to be dealt with at the discretion of his foes. In Persia, the Safavid Shah, Tahmas, was very accommodating in hosting the down-on-his-luck emperor. The Persian Shah rejected overtures by Kamran to hand his brother over in exchange for the Afghan city of Kandahar. Humayun even received Safavid aid in the form of troops which he used to invade Afghanistan. All Shah Tahmasp asked for in return was the Afghan city of Kandahar, which Humayun duly handed over. One interesting detail about this chapter was whether Humayun changed his religious views whilst in Persia or not. The Safavids were obviously Shia Muslims. In fact, they were the ones to convert Iran from a Sunni to a Shia state. There is some divergence amongst historians as to whether Humayun became a Shia, with some claiming that he accepted the Shia creed only outwardly to secure Safavid military aid, and others stating that he simply adopted certain Shia practices. But what we are sure of is that Humayun's ranks were swollen with Safavid, aka Shia administrators, artisans and military men, so the Persian influence was there to stay. With a renewed sense of confidence, Humayun marched into Afghanistan and recaptured Kabul, which he would go on to lose 2 more times to his brother Kamran. In the end, it seems he was aided by his reputation for leniency because he was joined by more and more of his brother's soldiers. Kamran was handed over to Humayun when he was in the midst of another conspiracy against his older brother. Even then, Humayun wanted to forgive his treacherous little brother, but his advisors implored him to set an example of continued treachery and betrayal. So Humayun was forced to blind his brother and sent him on Hajj to Mecca, making him impotent in the context of a power struggle because nobody wants a blind leader. In the meantime, the Suri dynasty established by Sher Shah was going through its own troubles after the death of its progenitor and his son. The ensuing Afghan civil war allowed Humayun an opportunity to stake a claim as a candidate for the power vacuum in northern India. If life is gracious enough to afford you a second chance, then there is nothing wrong with failing. In fact, it can be a powerful tool of learning. In Humayun's case, he had at least half a dozen reminders that he was an awful military general. So upon his return to India, he placed his army under the control of Bayram Khan, who would prove himself to be an absolutely pivotal figure in Mughal history. Capturing Lahore in no time, the Suris met Mughal troops at the Battle of Sirhind in 1555, where Humayun and Bayram Khan used tactics that had previously been used against them by Sher Shah to successfully win the battle and announce their victorious entrance to Delhi, re-establishing the Mughal Empire in India. Even though the Afghan Suri dynasty was not out of the picture, Humayun could now rule his realm with the peace of mind that he need not worry about his mischievous brothers who were all dead by now. His second reign would only last for 7 months. A freak occurrence would lead to his untimely death. In January 1556, Humayun was going down the stairs of his library with books in his arms, and he heard the muezzin call for the azan, and in trying to kneel down in reverence, the unfortunate emperor caught his foot in his robe and tumbled down the stairs to hit his head on a stone edge, dying a few days later. There are those who say that he fell because he was high on opium. This could very well be slander, but it's a fact that he was very fond of opium. As usual, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys soon. Peace.